Blue fire fell from the sky like rain. The ground of the alien world shook under heavy explosions. Broken ships burned across the battlefield, their metal glowing red in the dark air. Screams echoed between the tall crystal towers that once shined like stars. Now they were breaking apart. In the middle of the chaos, one human soldier was still standing. His armor was cracked, smoke rising from the deep cuts in his suit. Blood ran down his side, warm and heavy. Commander Aaron Hale could barely breathe. But he did not move away. In his arms lay the alien princess, unconscious and pale under the flashing lights of war. Her silver skin was marked with dust and ash. Her long white hair covered her face as she lay still against his chest. Enemy shadows moved through the smoke. Tall figures with dark armor and glowing red eyes were closing in. They were the Black Talons, the most feared rebel warriors in the Empire. They were not here for the human. They were here for her. Aaron's communicator crackled in his ear. "Retreat now, Commander, extraction failed, repeat, retreat immediately." The human fleet was pulling back. The sky above was no longer safe. Aaron looked down at the princess. She had trusted him. Just hours earlier, she had stood beside him on the balcony of the royal ship, curious about Earth, asking simple questions about oceans and rain. She had laughed when he told her humans still argued over small things. Now she was silent. Another explosion hit close, throwing dust into the air. Aaron fell to one knee but did not let her go. 3 Black Talons stepped out of the smoke, weapons raised. Their leader tilted his head slightly, surprised. "A human," the alien voice echoed through a mask. Aaron slowly reached for his pulse rifle. The weapon sparked, almost dead. He checked the power, 3 shots left. 3 enemies. Good enough. The first Talon fired, a beam of red plasma cutting through the air. Aaron rolled to the side, shielding the princess with his own body. The blast burned across his back, and pain exploded through him. He forced himself up and fired once. 1 Talon fell. He fired again. Another dropped. The third rushed forward with a blade of dark energy. Aaron had no power left in his rifle. He threw it aside and pulled a small combat knife. The Talon laughed at the tiny weapon. But Aaron did not hesitate. He stepped forward, not back. The blade pierced between the alien's armor plates. The Talon collapsed at his feet. Silence returned for only a second. Then more shadows appeared in the smoke. Too many. Aaron looked at the princess again. Her breathing was weak but steady. He knew he could run now. He was fast enough. The rebels were focused on her. He could survive. But he did not move. He adjusted his position and placed his body fully over hers, shielding her from every direction. More plasma shots hit him. His armor failed completely. Blood touched the cold alien ground. His vision blurred. In the distance, a massive royal warship broke through the clouds, silver and glowing. The symbol of the alien queen shined across its hull. The rebels paused. A wave of royal guard ships followed behind it. The Black Talons began to retreat, vanishing into the broken city. Heavy boots landed near Aaron. Royal guards surrounded him, weapons ready. One of them carefully lifted the princess from under his body. She was alive. Then the guards stepped back. The air became quiet. A tall figure walked forward slowly. The alien queen herself stood before the wounded human. Her crown of crystal light floated above her head. Her golden eyes studied him with cold silence. She had lost thousands of soldiers in wars against humans before. She did not trust them. She never had. Yet here one lay bleeding for her daughter. Aaron tried to speak, but only blood touched his lips. His hand still reached weakly toward where the princess had been. The queen noticed that small movement. "He protected her," one royal guard whispered. The queen knelt beside the human, something she had not done for any outsider before. She touched 2 fingers to his neck. His pulse was fading. Very weak. The princess suddenly woke in the arms of a medic. Her eyes searched quickly. Then she saw him on the ground. "Mother, he saved me," she whispered softly. The queen looked at her daughter, then back at the human. For the first time in many cycles, doubt entered her mind. Maybe humans were not what she believed. Aaron's breathing slowed even more. His eyes began to close. The queen stood and gave a sharp command. "Take him to the royal medical chamber, now." The guards hesitated for a second, surprised. She turned toward them, her voice colder than space itself. "That is an order." They lifted the human carefully and rushed toward the ship. The queen remained still for a moment, watching the blood he left behind on her world. She did not know why she had given that order. But something had changed in that instant. High above the battlefield, the royal ship rose into the sky carrying both the princess and the human who should have died. And somewhere in the shadows of the ruined city, unseen eyes watched the ship leave. The war was not over. It had only just begun. If you want to see what happens next and follow this story till the end, gently consider subscribing to this channel, so you do not miss the next part. The royal ship moved silently through deep space, its silver surface shining like cold moonlight. Inside the highest chamber of the vessel, the alien queen stood alone, staring at the endless darkness beyond the glass walls. Her face was calm, but her thoughts were not. She had ruled the Astravian Empire for 300 cycles. She had defeated warlords, crushed rebellions, and survived 2 full wars against humanity. And she had learned one simple lesson. Humans could not be trusted. To her, they were ambitious, emotional, unpredictable creatures who destroyed as quickly as they built. She remembered the First Contact War clearly. Human fleets had entered Astravian space claiming peace, but fear and misunderstanding had turned into bloodshed within days. Entire colonies burned. Astravian children were lost in orbital strikes. And since that time, the queen had built her empire on strength, not trust. So when her daughter, Princess Lyra, began asking questions about humans, the queen had warned her. "Curiosity about enemies leads to weakness," she had said. But Lyra was different from her mother. She believed peace was possible. She believed humans were changing. That belief had led her to secretly visit the outer colonies near the human border. And that visit had nearly cost her life. The queen's golden eyes slowly closed as the memory of the battlefield returned to her mind. A human soldier, bleeding, barely alive, shielding her daughter with his own body. It made no sense. If humans were selfish, why had he stayed? If humans feared death, why had he chosen it? A soft sound interrupted her thoughts. The chamber doors opened, and the royal healer entered, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, the human remains alive," the healer said carefully. The queen turned slowly. "Alive does not mean saved," she replied coldly. The damage was severe. Internal bleeding, broken bones, energy burns across 70% of his back. Survival probability is less than 5%, the healer explained. The queen said nothing for a long moment. 5%. Such a small number. It would be easier if he died. Dead heroes do not complicate politics. Dead humans do not change old beliefs. "Ensure he receives full treatment," she finally ordered. The healer hesitated slightly, surprised. "Full treatment, Your Majesty?" "Yes," the queen answered firmly. The healer bowed again and left quickly. Across the ship, inside the royal medical chamber, Commander Aaron Hale lay surrounded by advanced alien technology. Strange lights scanned his body. Thin beams of blue energy worked to repair damaged tissue. His chest rose and fell slowly under mechanical support. Princess Lyra stood beside him, refusing to leave. Her royal robes had been replaced with simple white cloth. Her silver hands trembled as she watched the machines work. "You should rest, Princess," a guard gently suggested. "I will not," she replied softly. Her eyes never moved from the human's face. "He had orders to retreat," she whispered. The guard looked confused. "He disobeyed?" "Yes," Lyra said. "He chose to stay." She remembered the moment clearly. When the rebels attacked, she had frozen. Not out of fear, but shock. The Black Talons were not random attackers. They were former Austravian soldiers. Traitors who believed peace with humans was betrayal. They hated her for supporting alliance talks. They wanted her death to restart the war. And Aaron had known that. He had seen the sniper flash first. He had pushed her out of the way before the first blast struck. He could have escaped when his team retreated. He had the chance. But instead he lifted her and ran deeper into danger to draw attention away from her. Lyra's eyes filled with quiet emotion. "He never once blamed us," she said softly. The medical monitors suddenly beeped louder. Aaron's heart rhythm became unstable. Doctors rushed closer, adjusting energy levels. "His body is rejecting the cellular repair field," one healer announced urgently. "Human biology is resisting integration," another added. Lyra stepped back in fear. "Will he die?" she asked. No one answered immediately. High above in the command chamber, the Queen received another report. A rebel transmission had been intercepted. The leader of the Black Talons had sent a message across hidden networks. "The princess lives. The human lives. This is unacceptable. Phase 2 begins soon." The Queen's expression darkened. Phase 2. This had not been a random ambush. It was part of something larger. Someone inside the Empire had leaked the princess's location. There was betrayal within her own court. And now a human soldier lay near death because of it. The Queen walked swiftly toward the medical wing, her long cloak flowing behind her like liquid shadow. Guards stepped aside instantly. When she entered the chamber, silence followed her presence. Lyra turned quickly. "Mother," she whispered. The Queen's eyes fell upon the human. His skin was pale. His breathing shallow. So fragile compared to Austravian physiology. "Why did he stay?" the Queen asked her daughter quietly. Lyra did not hesitate. "Because he gave his word," she replied. The Queen studied her daughter carefully. "A word is air," she said coldly. "To humans, maybe," Lyra answered softly. "But to him, it was everything." The Queen stepped closer to the medical table. She observed the burns, the torn armor placed nearby, the bloodstains still visible along the edges of his suit. This was not the sacrifice of a coward. This was deliberate. The monitors suddenly dropped in tone. Aaron's pulse weakened dangerously. One healer looked up urgently. "We are losing him." Lyra grabbed her mother's arm in fear. "Please," she whispered. The Queen stared at the human for a long second. Then she gave an order that shocked everyone in the room. "Activate the core chamber," she commanded. The healers froze. "Your Majesty, that technology is reserved only for royal blood," one said carefully. "And this human saved royal blood," the Queen replied firmly. There was no argument after that. As the chamber doors opened and the most powerful healing device in the Empire powered up, a deep vibration filled the room. The Queen watched closely, her face unreadable. She still did not trust humans. But she could not ignore what she had seen on that battlefield. And somewhere in the darkness of the Empire, hidden enemies were already preparing their next move. If the human survived, he would not wake into peace. He would wake into something far more dangerous. And the Queen knew one thing with growing certainty. His survival might change the future of her empire forever. The core chamber glowed with deep blue light as ancient energy moved around the human's broken body. Commander Aaron Hale floated inside a field of controlled gravity, surrounded by royal technology that had healed kings and queens for generations. No human had ever entered this chamber before. No outsider had ever been considered worthy. Yet here he was, barely alive, connected to the heart of an alien empire. Princess Lyra stood behind the protective barrier, her hands pressed together in silent hope. The alien queen remained still beside her, watching the healing process with unreadable eyes. Outside the medical wing, the empire looked calm. But calm was only an illusion. Because beyond the shining cities and silent fleets, a hidden war had already begun. Far from the capital, deep within a broken asteroid belt near the outer colonies, a secret meeting was taking place. Dark ships gathered without royal markings. Inside one of them stood General Kaler, former hero of the Australian military, now leader of the Black Talons. His armor was marked with scars from old battles against humans. His voice echoed across the chamber as holograms of rebel commanders surrounded him. "The princess lives because of a human," he said coldly. "That weakness will destroy our empire." Some commanders shifted uncomfortably. The Queen had signed a peace agreement with Earth 2 cycles ago. Trade had begun. Joint research projects had started. Borders were open for the first time in history. But Kaler believed peace was surrender. He believed humans would never stop expanding. Never stop wanting more. "The Queen blinds herself with hope," he continued. "She forgets what humans did to our colonies." A hologram showed images from the First Contact War. Burned cities, destroyed ships, lost lives. Pain that had shaped an entire generation. "But the war is not over," Kaler said quietly. "It is only sleeping." Back on the royal ship, the Queen entered her private war chamber. A circular room filled with floating maps of the galaxy. Admirals and intelligence officers waited for her command. "Report," she ordered calmly. One officer stepped forward. "We intercepted rebel transmissions confirming coordinated operations across 3 outer systems." Another added. "Sabotage cells have been activated inside trade stations shared with humans." The Queen's golden eyes narrowed slightly. "So this was never about my daughter alone," she said softly. "No, Your Majesty," the Admiral replied. "This is larger." The truth became clear in that moment. The attack on the princess was not random. It was a spark meant to ignite something far bigger. If she had died, blame would fall on human security forces. The fragile peace would shatter. War would return overnight. And millions would suffer again. "They want humans and Australians fighting each other," the Queen said quietly. "Yes, Your Majesty. And the human who saved her has become a problem for them," she added. "Because his survival proved something dangerous. It proved that cooperation was possible. It proved that a human soldier would risk everything to protect alien life. That idea alone threatened the rebels' entire belief system." Inside the core chamber, Aaron's body reacted violently to the energy surge. His muscles tightened. His heart rate spiked. Memories flashed through his mind. The battlefield. The princess falling. His squad retreating. His choice to stay. Even unconscious, his body resisted surrender. Lyra noticed the sudden movement. "He's fighting," she whispered. The royal healer adjusted the chamber settings carefully. "Human physiology is stronger than expected," the healer admitted quietly. The Queen heard that statement clearly. Stronger than expected. Humans were always underestimated. That had been a mistake before. She would not repeat it now. Suddenly, alarms sounded throughout the ship. A sharp red signal flashed across the walls. The Admiral's voice came through urgently. "Your Majesty, multiple explosions detected in the outer defense grid." The Queen moved instantly toward the command deck. Outside the viewing window, distant flashes of light marked sabotage points. Rebel ships were not attacking openly. They were cutting power lines, disabling communication relays, isolating sectors one by one. "They are preparing the capital for siege," the Admiral warned. "No," the Queen replied firmly. "They are testing our response." She understood Kaler's strategy now. He did not want a single battle. He wanted slow chaos. He wanted citizens to fear human alliance. To doubt their queen. To question peace. And in the center of it all lay a human soldier suspended between life and death. If Aaron died, the rebels could twist the story. They could claim alien technology killed him. They could claim humans were sacrificed. But if he lived, if he woke and told the truth, He would expose the rebels' manipulation. The Queen turned to her commanders. "Seal the capital." Quietly, she ordered. "No public panic. And find every rebel cell inside my empire." Her voice was calm, but it carried steel beneath it. The war no one knew about was no longer hidden from her. It had already begun. Back in the core chamber, the blue energy dimmed slowly. The healing cycle reached its critical point. Aaron's body stopped trembling. His heart rhythm stabilized for the first time since the battlefield. Lyra stepped closer to the glass barrier. "Come back," she whispered softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, his fingers moved. A small, almost invisible motion. But it was enough. The royal healer looked at the readings in disbelief. "He is stabilizing," the healer announced quietly. Far across space, inside the dark rebel ship, General Kayla received the same update through hidden spies within the capital. "The human lives," the spy's voice said. Kayla's expression hardened. "Then phase 2 accelerates," he replied coldly. "Because if the human survived, he would become more than a soldier. He would become a symbol. And symbols were far more dangerous than weapons." The galaxy stood at the edge of a silent storm. An empire divided from within. A peace built on fragile trust. And a human who should have died. But did not. The core chamber slowly powered down, and the blue light that surrounded the human faded into soft silver. Commander Aaron Hale fell gently onto the medical platform as gravity returned to normal. For a long moment, nothing happened. The royal healers studied their instruments carefully, afraid to speak too soon. Then Aaron's chest rose in a steady breath. His heart rate held stable. He was alive. Princess Lyra exhaled softly, not realizing she had been holding her breath for several minutes. The alien queen did not show relief, but her sharp eyes softened for a brief second before returning to their usual cold focus. "Move him to a secured recovery chamber," she ordered calmly. Double guard rotation. The command was not only for protection. It was also precaution. Because a living human inside the royal capital was more dangerous than a dead one. Hours later, in a quiet chamber overlooking the glowing city, Aaron slowly opened his eyes. The ceiling above him was unfamiliar, curved and shining with faint alien symbols. His body felt heavy, but not broken. Pain was there, but distant. He tried to move and felt the pull of medical bands attached to his arms. Memory returned in pieces. The battlefield. The princess. The queen. He sat up slightly, and the door opened at once. 2 royal guards stepped inside, tall and silent. Their weapons were lowered but ready. "You are awake," one of them said, voice calm but cautious. Aaron looked around slowly. "Where is she?" he asked immediately. The guard exchanged a brief glance with the other. "The princess is safe." Only then did Aaron relax back against the platform. That single answer was enough for him. Moments later, the chamber doors opened again. Princess Lyra entered quietly. She was no longer wearing royal armor or ceremonial robes. She looked simple, almost human in her expression. For a second, they simply looked at each other. "You survived," she said softly. Aaron gave a weak half-smile. "So did you." Silence followed, but it was not uncomfortable. It was heavy with things neither of them fully understood yet. Lyra stepped closer. "You had orders to retreat," she said carefully. "Yes," he replied. "And you disobeyed." "Yes." She studied him closely. "Why?" Aaron's answer came without hesitation. "Because you were still there." Lyra frowned slightly. "That is not logical," she said. "Maybe not," he replied simply. But it was right. Outside the chamber, hidden behind a one-way energy screen, the alien queen watched the conversation in silence. She had chosen to observe before speaking to him herself. She wanted to hear truth without fear. Inside the room, Lyra's voice lowered slightly. "You knew you could die," she said. Yes. And you still chose to stay. Aaron looked at her directly. I gave my word I would protect you, he said calmly. And on Earth, a promise means something. Lyra absorbed his words carefully. In Australian culture, promises were contracts of law and blood. They were rarely spoken lightly. You do not even know me, she said quietly. Aaron shook his head slightly. I don't need to, he answered. You trusted me enough to stand beside me. That was enough. The Queen felt something unfamiliar at those words. It was not admiration. Not yet. But it was no longer simple suspicion either. Before she could step away from the observation screen, alarms suddenly echoed across the palace. A deep vibration shook the walls. The lights flickered briefly. Inside the recovery chamber, Aaron's eyes sharpened instantly. That doesn't sound like a drill, he said, already trying to stand. You are not strong enough, Lyra protested. He ignored the weakness in his legs and forced himself upright. I don't plan to fight, he said quietly. But I need to know what's happening. The chamber doors opened abruptly. A royal officer entered with urgency in his posture. Your Highness, the outer shield grid has been breached. Lyra's expression changed immediately. By who? Unknown signatures. Internal sabotage confirmed. The Queen entered the chamber at that moment, her presence instantly commanding silence. The rebels move faster than expected, she said calmly. Her gaze shifted to Aaron. You should still be unconscious, she said. I've had worse mornings, Aaron replied quietly. Some guards reacted to his tone, but the Queen raised a hand slightly, silencing them. This attack is not directed at you, she told him. It is directed at the peace you represent. Aaron understood that immediately. They want war, he said. Yes, the Queen replied. And you surviving complicates their plan. Another explosion echoed in the distance. The capital's energy grid trembled. Aaron met the Queen's eyes directly. You think I'm part of their strategy, he said calmly. I think you are now part of my empire's problem, the Queen answered honestly. There was no insult in her voice, only truth. Aaron nodded slightly. Then let me help fix it, he said simply. The Queen studied him carefully. You owe us nothing, she said. I owe her, Aaron replied, glancing briefly toward Lyra. And I owe my people the truth. The room fell silent again. Outside the palace windows, distant flashes of light marked fighting in the lower city levels. The rebels were not attacking openly. They were spreading fear. Testing defenses. Breaking trust piece by piece. The Queen stepped closer to the human. For now, you remain under protection, she said firmly. You will not leave this palace. Aaron nodded once. But if they come here, he said quietly. I won't hide. The Queen held his gaze for a long moment. In that silence, something shifted between them. Not friendship. Not trust. But recognition. Two leaders in different forms. Both carrying the weight of worlds. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, General Kaler received new intelligence reports. The human walks again, the spy whispered. Kaler's eyes darkened. Then we escalate, he replied softly. Because promises between enemies were fragile things. And the war no one saw was moving closer to the throne with every passing moment. Night fell over the Australian capital, but the city did not sleep. The Crystal Throne Palace rose at the center like a tower of light, its walls shining with living energy that protected the heart of the empire. From a distance it looked calm, untouched, almost eternal. But beneath that calm, systems were failing one by one. Rebel sabotage units had already cut power lines in the outer districts. Defense satellites were going dark. Communication towers flickered and died. The siege had begun long before anyone called it that. Inside the palace command hall, holographic maps filled the air with flashing red signals. Admirals spoke over one another as reports arrived every second. Sector 12 shields offline. Ground forces requesting reinforcement. civilian panic spreading across the lower markets. The alien queen stood in the center of it all, perfectly still, her golden eyes scanning every detail. She did not raise her voice. She did not show fear. But she understood something clearly. This was not only a military attack. It was psychological. The rebels wanted the people to doubt her strength. They wanted to show that peace with humans had weakened the empire. And they had chosen the perfect moment. Because the capital was still processing the news that a human soldier had been brought inside royal walls. Whispers were already spreading through the population. Why protect a human? Why trust an outsider? Why risk tradition for peace? In a secured corridor near the inner palace, Commander Aaron Hale stood in partial combat gear. The royal healers had insisted he rest longer. But rest was a luxury he no longer believed in. His body still ached, his back wrapped in advanced healing fabric. Yet his eyes were focused, sharp, alive. Princess Lyra stood beside him. "You are not fully recovered," she said firmly. "I am recovered enough," he answered calmly. Outside the thick crystal windows, distant explosions lit the sky in brief flashes of red and blue. "They are moving toward the palace," Lyra said quietly. "Yes," Aaron replied. "They want a symbol." Before she could respond, a violent shock ran through the floor. The outer defensive barrier around the palace flickered visibly for a second. In the command hall, an officer shouted. Multiple rebel ships emerging from cloaked positions above the capital. General Kaler had made his move openly now. Dark warships appeared like shadows tearing through light. They did not fire randomly. They targeted shield generators with precision. Each strike was measured, calculated. This was not chaos. This was strategy. The Queen's voice cut through the noise in the command hall. "Activate inner shield protocol," she ordered. "And prepare ground forces for direct assault." Back in the corridor, Aaron stepped toward a weapons locker secured behind an energy seal. 2 royal guards moved to block him instantly. "You are under protective order," one said firmly. Aaron met his gaze without aggression. "If the palace falls, protection won't matter," he said calmly. Before tension could rise further, the Queen herself appeared at the end of the corridor. The guards stepped aside immediately. Her eyes rested on Aaron for a long moment. "You seek to fight in a war that is not yours," she said evenly. Aaron shook his head slightly. "If the rebels win, this becomes everyone's war," he replied. Silence followed. Another explosion shook the building, closer this time. Through the windows, rebel dropships descended toward the palace courtyard. Dark figures leapt from them before they even touched the ground. The Black Talons had arrived at the throne itself. The Queen turned toward her daughter briefly. "Remain in the inner chamber," she commanded. Lyra did not argue, but her eyes shifted toward Aaron. He gave her a small nod. A silent promise without words. The Queen looked back at him once more. "You may fight," she said finally. "But you will follow my command." Aaron nodded once. "That is fair." Moments later, palace gates shattered under concentrated plasma fire. Rebel warriors flooded into the outer halls. Royal guards engaged immediately, energy blades clashing in bright arcs of light. The air filled with the sharp scent of burning metal and ozone. Aaron moved with careful precision, not reckless speed. He observed patterns quickly. The rebels were strong but predictable. They advanced in tight formations. He grabbed a fallen pulse weapon from a royal guard and adjusted its grip instinctively. "Break their line from the left flank," he called to nearby soldiers. They hesitated for only a second before obeying. Human tactics were different from Astravian doctrine. Less elegant. More disruptive. And in that disruption, the rebels lost formation. Aaron moved through the chaos with focused calm, covering gaps, pulling wounded guards to safety. He was not trying to be a hero. He was trying to hold ground. From above, General Kaler watched the assault through tactical feeds. "The human fights," a rebel officer informed him. Kaler's jaw tightened. He should be dead, he said quietly. Back inside the palace, the battle pushed closer to the inner throne chamber. The crystal throne itself glowed faintly behind layered shields. Rebel leaders broke through a side corridor using explosive charges. They were meters away from reaching the heart of the Empire. Aaron saw the breach first. Without hesitation, he ran toward it. A plasma blast grazed his shoulder, reopening half-healed wounds. He did not slow down. 3 black talons charged through smoke. He dropped one with a precise shot, dodged another strike, and physically slammed the third into a shattered column. The impact echoed through the hall. Royal guards regrouped behind him. For a brief second, the advance stopped. But then a larger explosion shook the ceiling. Crystal fragments rained down like sharp ice. A massive rebel warship had broken through the upper shield layer. Its cannons aimed directly at the throne chamber. The queen stood at the center of that chamber, calm even as the walls trembled. She did not retreat. She did not hide. Aaron saw the targeting beam align through the fractured ceiling. There was no time for orders. No time for debate. He moved forward without thinking, throwing himself between the incoming blast and the queen's position. The explosion struck with blinding light. The shockwave hurled him across the chamber floor. The inner shield absorbed most of the energy. But not all. Smoke filled the air. Silence followed. When the dust cleared, Aaron lay motionless near the steps of the crystal throne. His armor cracked again, burns spreading across his side. The queen slowly stepped down from the throne platform. She looked at the human who had once again chosen to stand between death and her bloodline. Around them, rebel forces began to retreat under heavy counterattack from arriving royal fleets. The siege was breaking. But at a cost. The queen knelt beside the fallen human, her expression no longer unreadable. "He does not belong to us," one guard whispered. The queen's eyes remained fixed on Aaron's unmoving form. "No," she replied quietly. "But he fights as if he does." Above the palace, rebel ships withdrew into the darkness. General Kaler watched the battlefield fade. His plan had failed to take the throne. But he had proven something. The Empire could bleed. And now the human had bled for it twice. Inside the shattered throne chamber, medics rushed toward Aaron once more. Princess Lyra broke protocol and ran to his side. "Stay with me," she whispered desperately. The queen stood behind them, silent but no longer distant. The siege of the crystal throne had ended for now. But the war had stepped fully into the light. And the human who should have died had once again become the center of its storm. Smoke still drifted through the shattered throne chamber as emergency crews worked in silence. The once perfect crystal walls were cracked, glowing weakly as repair drones moved like silver insects across the surface. The siege of the crystal throne was over, but its echo remained in every corner of the palace. At the center of that silence lay Commander Aaron Hale, unmoving on a floating medical stretcher. His armor had been cut away. His body covered in burns and reopened wounds. This was the second time he had nearly died inside royal walls. The royal healers moved quickly, but their expressions were tense. "The internal damage is severe," one reported quietly. "The previous regeneration cycle weakened his system," another added. "His body may not survive another core activation." Princess Lyra stood beside the stretcher, her hands trembling despite her effort to remain composed. "Then find another way," she demanded softly. The healers lowered their eyes. "There is no other way." Across the chamber, the alien queen stood still, watching everything. Her empire had survived the siege. Her enemies had retreated. But her thoughts were not on victory. They were on the human who had thrown himself in front of a blast meant for her throne. A throne he did not belong to. A throne that had once seen humans only as enemies. An officer approached her carefully. "Your Majesty, rebel forces have withdrawn beyond the outer defense ring." "And General Kaler?" she asked calmly. "He escaped?" Of course he had. Kaler never fought for glory. He fought for long games. The queen nodded once, then turned her attention back to Aaron. Prepare the core chamber, she ordered quietly. The healers hesitated again. Your Majesty, the risk. I am aware of the risk, she interrupted, her voice steady but sharper now. What I ask is not suggestion. They bowed immediately and moved to obey. Lyra stepped closer to her mother once the room cleared. You would use the core again, she asked softly. Yes, the queen replied. He cannot survive without it. Lyra searched her mother's face carefully. This is more than repayment, she said quietly. The queen did not answer immediately. She walked toward the large window overlooking the capital. Fires still burned in distant districts. Repair ships moved across the skyline. Citizens gathered in small groups below, fearful and confused. This empire stands on strength, the queen said at last. For centuries, that strength meant isolation. She turned slowly toward her daughter. I believed humans would always threaten what we built. And now? Lyra asked gently. Now I see one who risked everything without demand, the queen replied. That changes calculations. In the core chamber, Aaron's unconscious form was suspended once more in the center of ancient power. The room glowed brighter than before. Energy spiraled upward like controlled lightning. The queen entered alone this time, dismissing all but the chief healer. She stepped close to the floating human, studying his face carefully. So fragile compared to her species. So stubbornly alive. You are inconvenient, she said quietly, though he could not hear her. You force questions I did not wish to ask. The core activated fully. A deep vibration filled the chamber as royal energy surged into his damaged body. On the outer edges of the empire, hidden rebel observers detected the surge immediately. Inside a dark command vessel, General Kaler stared at the energy readings in disbelief. They are using the core again, an officer whispered. For a human? Kaler's expression hardened into cold fury. She chooses him over tradition, he said softly. This will fracture her support. Back in the capital, news of the second core activation began spreading quietly among political leaders. Some nobles whispered outrage. Royal energy was sacred. Reserved for Australian blood. To use it twice on an outsider was almost unthinkable. The queen knew this. She knew the cost of her decision was not only energy. It was political. It would challenge centuries of belief. But she did not step back. Inside the core, Aaron's body reacted violently at first. Muscles tightening, breath stopping briefly. Then slowly stabilizing. The burns along his skin began to fade. Internal fractures sealed. Blood flow normalized. Minutes passed like hours. The queen did not move from her position. Finally, the chief healer looked at the readings in stunned silence. He will live, the healer announced quietly. Not barely live. Live. The core powered down slowly. Gravity returned gently. Aaron's body lowered onto the platform once more. This time his breathing was steady and natural. The queen stepped closer. For a moment she considered leaving before he woke. Maintaining distance. Maintaining authority. But something inside her refused that instinct. Moments later, Aaron's eyes opened slowly. Confusion faded into awareness quickly. He recognized the chamber immediately. You again, he said weakly, attempting a faint smile. The queen did not smile back, but her gaze was steady. You continue to disrupt my expectations, she said calmly. Aaron blinked, trying to sit up. Did we win? He asked first. Yes, she answered. Then it was worth it, he replied simply. Silence filled the chamber again, but this time it felt different. Less hostile. More thoughtful. You understand the cost of what you have done, the queen asked quietly. I protected someone, Aaron replied. That's all? You protected my bloodline, she corrected. You altered the course of my empire. Aaron looked at her carefully. That wasn't my goal, he said honestly. I don't fight for politics. The queen studied him for a long moment. That is precisely why you are dangerous, she said softly. Outside the chamber, advisors gathered urgently. Political pressure was rising. Several noble houses demanded explanation for the repeated use of the core on a human. Rumors were spreading among the public. Some praised the human hero. Others questioned the queen's judgment. The empire stood at a fragile turning point. The queen turned away from Aaron slowly. There will be a public assembly at dawn, she said calmly. An announcement must be made. Aaron frowned slightly. About what? He asked. The queen paused at the chamber entrance, her silhouette framed by fading blue light. About the future, she replied. Because she had reached a decision. One that would shock her court, challenge her nobles, and send a message to both rebels and humans alike. A decision not made from emotion, but from observation. Strength recognized strength. Sacrifice demanded acknowledgement. And at dawn, before her entire empire, the alien queen would speak words no Austravian ruler had ever spoken before. Dawn rose slowly over the Austravian capital. The broken towers of the city caught the first light and reflected it across the sky like shattered glass turning into gold. Repair ships moved between buildings, sealing wounds left by the siege. Citizens gathered in the central plaza below the Crystal Throne Palace. They came in silence. Some curious. Some angry. Some afraid. Word had spread across the empire during the night. The queen would address them directly. Not through projection screens. Not through military command channels. But in person. That alone meant something serious was coming. Inside the palace, Commander Aaron Hale stood near the balcony entrance overlooking the plaza. He wore a simple formal uniform provided by the Royal Guard. Not armor. Not weapons. His wounds were healed, but faint marks remained along his skin. Reminders of the cost. Princess Lyra stood beside him, dressed in ceremonial silver robes that shimmered softly under the morning light. You do not have to stand beside me, she said quietly. Aaron looked out at the massive crowd below. I was told there would be an announcement, he replied calmly. There will be, she said. Her tone held something deeper than uncertainty. Before he could ask further, the great doors behind them opened. The alien queen entered the balcony with measured steps. Her crown of light floated above her head, brighter than it had ever been. The plaza fell completely silent the moment she appeared. Millions of golden eyes focused upward. The queen raised one hand slowly, and her voice carried clearly across the entire capital without effort. People of Astravia, she began. You stood strong during the siege. You defended your homes, your families, and your throne. A ripple of quiet pride moved through the crowd. But strength alone is not enough to secure the future, she continued. Her gaze shifted slightly toward Aaron, though she did not fully turn to him yet. For generations, we defined strength as separation. We believed isolation protected us. Yet isolation also bred fear. A murmur passed through the nobles gathered closest to the palace steps. They understood the direction of her words. And they did not all approve. During the recent attack, the queen said firmly, my daughter was targeted to ignite war between our empire and humanity. Gasps rose softly from the crowd. This plot was not organized by humans, she continued. It was organized by those within our own blood who reject peace. Anger stirred across the plaza now. The black talons were no longer whispers in the dark. They were traitors in open light. The queen stepped forward slightly. And in that moment of chaos, when betrayal surrounded my heir, she said clearly, a human soldier did not retreat. A human soldier did not hesitate. He chose to stand between death and Austravian royalty. All eyes turned toward Aaron now. He stood still, uncomfortable under such attention. Some in the crowd looked at him with suspicion. Others with disbelief. A few with respect. The queen's voice did not soften. He nearly died protecting her, she declared. And when our capital was attacked, he did so again. The silence that followed felt heavy. Centuries of hatred did not disappear easily. Tradition did not bend without resistance. Several noble leaders exchanged sharp glances. One of them stepped forward boldly from the front of the plaza. "Your Majesty," he called out. "Are we to reward outsiders above our own warriors?" The question carried tension across the crowd. The queen did not turn her head toward the noble. "Our warriors fought bravely," she replied evenly. "And they will be honored. But bravery does not belong to one species." She finally turned fully toward Aaron. He met her gaze without fear. The queen then did something no Astravian ruler had done in recorded history. She descended one step from the elevated throne platform on the balcony. A subtle gesture, but symbolic beyond measure. "Commander Aaron Hale," she said clearly. "You fought without demand. You sacrificed without expectation. You stood not for politics, but for promise." The plaza held its breath. "My daughter lives because of you," she continued. "And this empire still stands because of the courage you showed when others would have fled." Lyra's heart pounded quietly beside him. She did not know exactly what her mother would say next, but she sensed its weight. The queen turned back to the people, her voice rising slightly. "Our future cannot be built on fear. It must be built on strength chosen freely." She paused only briefly, then spoke words that sent shockwaves through the empire. "My daughter will be yours, human." Gasps erupted across the plaza. Some voices shouted in disbelief. Others stood frozen in silence. The meaning was clear. This was not simply gratitude. This was alliance sealed by royal bond. A union not forced, but declared as recognition of honor. Aaron's eyes widened slightly. He had faced plasma fire without flinching. But this was different. He turned slowly toward Lyra. She met his gaze steadily. There was no fear in her eyes. Only calm understanding. The queen raised her hand again, silencing the chaos below. "This is not surrender," she declared firmly. "This is strength choosing strength. Through this union, our alliance with humanity will not rest on treaties alone. It will rest on trust earned through sacrifice." In the distance, hidden among distant asteroid shadows, General Kaler watched the broadcast feed in stunned fury. "She binds them together," one rebel officer whispered. "Yes," Kaler replied coldly. "And that makes them harder to break." Back on the balcony, the crowd's noise slowly shifted. The shock remained. But something else began to grow. A realization. This human had not come to conquer. He had not demanded power. He had bled for them without promise of reward. Aaron stepped forward slightly, his voice steady though not amplified like the queen's. "I did not fight for a throne," he said simply. "I fought for someone who trusted me." His words were not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just honest. "And if peace is possible," he added, "then it is worth fighting for too." The plaza grew quiet again, but this time it was not tension. It was thought. The queen studied the faces below carefully. She had taken a risk greater than any battle. But leadership was not safety. It was decision. She stepped back beside her daughter and the human. "Let the Empire witness this," she said firmly. "Not as weakness, but as the beginning of a new era." Lyra slowly reached for Aaron's hand. He hesitated only for a second before taking it. The gesture was small. But across the capital, across the empire, across the fragile line between two civilizations, it meant everything. Above them, the repaired palace walls caught the full light of morning. The crystal throne stood unbroken despite the siege. And for the first time in generations, the future of Astravia did not feel like a return to war. It felt uncertain, complicated, risky, but hopeful. And in that quiet hope, an empire chose not fear, but change.